Now I will tell you about the first field trip that I accompanied Professor Menon to Padappakara to the east of Kollam. Padappakara is well known in the geologic history of Kerala. And for the fact that the only marine deposition or only evidence of marine deposition occurs there as a thin limestone, maybe hardly 70 or 60 centimeters thick, underlying a layer of laterite, which geologists believed, was equivalent of Varkalis, and later on went through the process of lateritization. So, we started off from Thrivikramji Palayam at 6:30, reached Kollam like 7:45, 8 o'clock around. Then Professor Menon said we will go for a breakfast in the Ayers canteen associated with the Kollam railway station. And of course, Professor had his own choice of idli vada, etc. I had idli vada plus a dosha and coffee. In another hour or less than an hour, Professor Menon just drove right to the point of walking distance to the exposure at the eastern shore of Ashtamudi Kayal. As we walked down to the shore, I was carrying the field gadgets and a sack to carry samples and a lot of newspapers. And newspapers, actually, we were using always to wrap up the sample, putting an appropriate label inside of it. And as we were walking down and reaching closer to the cliff section, which is only hardly 20 feet above the lake water level, we passed by a house where an elderly person, totally grey in color of his forest hair and nearly bald, just walked out and followed us. He was talking to Professor Menon about the purpose of this visit we make to that place. Then Professor Menon said we wanted to take a look at the section there, cliff there, and look at the rocks and possibly take some samples off. Then this man told the professor that this place was once upon a time visited by A.K. Day, Dr. A.K. Day, who did an exhaustive study of the macro fossils, mainly palacipods of the of the Koilon series. And this gentleman, Dr. A.K. Day, had used a little bit of blasting and cutting, etc., with the help of laborers, so that he could access to whatever he wanted. And later on, A.K. Day published this monograph on the palacipods of the Koilon series in a Paleontologia India. Okay, that much for A.K. Day. Well, we just walked down in the Professor Menon. I was just following him, that's all. was walking around the shore, up and down, one way, just to have a different look from different perspectives, different points, in order to know, yes, which he told me later, which is the best exposed section. What is the best exposed section? A section that will expose, that will provide access to all the stratigraphic horizons. And of course, like I said earlier, the section showed Koilon limestone very boldly, 60 to 70 centimeters thickness, and above that a laterite with a clear contact, clearly washed down contact, no transition bed whatsoever. But on the other hand, below the Koilon limestone, the lead as we call it, there were transition beds. In other words, there were at least 3 or 4 different argillaceous horizons with different colors and varying thicknesses. And one of those, I think the topmost one, are immediately below the organic matter rich shale like rock, thin bedded rock. There was a horizon of argillaceous rock which probably showed a totally different color, a color that is very much consequent to the exposure to what you call as above the surface, above the water level. And my feeling was, my interpretation now, then and now is that this particular layer was probably exposed to, severely exposed to, once upon a time. And this, as a consequence, had gone through desiccation, formation of mud cracks, but also a degree of oxidation. But what had happened, if you took very carefully the piece with a magnifying glass, you will notice several molds of tiny organisms, molds left behind by the organisms. It is not a cast. In other words, there are small depressions out of which you can recognize the features that will point to the presence of organisms, organic, microfossils, micropelicipods, if you wanted to call it that way. Then, of course, the operation started. When Sara told me, you take a sample from there, he also assisted. He told me how to. I collected the sample, packed it. He was also told me how to label it, and we collected the shaly rocks, shaly beds below the Koilon limestone, and the transition bed also. Then a chunk of Koilon limestone was broken and open, and interestingly, our exterior was weather beaten and had attained a brownish tan for the limestone, whereas the core inside was perfect and had a dark grayish color, and you could see empty number of fossils, broken shells, broken fragments of shells, etc., etc. All these were collected together and then packed. And we collected all this with the help of a laborer, and it was taken over to our car. What had happened was, when we were about to get past the home where we met the man, gray-haired man, he invited us for a cup of coffee for refreshing. Of course, Professor Menon did not disagree to this, and we all walked into that home, And within another 10 minutes or so, the coffee was served. And we were ready to start off to the car. And we went to the car and loaded all the stuff in the boot of the car, and then made a goodbye to the laborer, paying his wages. Then it was a trip to Trivandrum with a break somewhere along Artingal for a lunch, again in a Ayers hotel. That was the first field trip. Interestingly, this padappakara occurrence was once upon a time in the 1860s, was spotted by General Cullen, who was the resident in the state of Travancore. In fact, the story goes like this. Cullen Sahib, or the General Cullen, collected some samples of this limestone and had it sent over to King's College London to figure out the chemistry of it and the worth of this rock in making a cement plant for local use. That, in other words, General Cullen is known for his scientific approach, as well as enlarging the industrial expansion or industrial footprint of the Travancore states. So General Cullen, of course, most people do not probably recognize this fact. He wanted to not go away to Britain during his last days. Instead, he wanted to go to Nilgiris. He built a home apparently there, and he was traveling toward Nilgiris to his home, Indian home. But once he reached Alappuzha, he became feverish and finally died there. And the story says that there is a road in Alappuzha which is named after General Cullen.